It is not often that a preacher can appropriately share a bathroom encounter as he begins his sermon. But as has been my habit since my prostate surgery, right after the Lord's Supper and before the offering, I take a little trip. So I took my little trip and I walked up to the urinal. And there was this voice behind me that said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm David." And I said, "Who are you?" And this small voice says, "Your worst nightmare." Literally, he said, "Your worst nightmare." So I said, "Well, I'm not afraid." And the voice said, "Because God is with you." And I said, "Exactly right. That is the sermon this morning. He preached the sermon already." If you're missing a young man, I hope it's a young man, then you have someone to be commended for, except for that part about being my worst nightmare. And if none of the young men are missing, then we had an angel in the bathroom a moment ago. I guarantee you. Because that encounter really fit pretty well with this morning's lesson. Thought it went all right. You really do want to be that person, don't you? You want to be the one that acts like he knows what everyone else is already trying to learn. You remember Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne walking around the prison yard? And he is described by Morgan Freeman, of course, as walking around like he doesn't have a care in the world. Because Andy knows something that no one else knows. He knows he's innocent. By this time, he also knows that he's dropping all the dirt from his cell out of his pant pockets while he's walking. But if you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to give a spoiler away. It's a good movie, or at least the TV version. I don't know that I've seen the unedited version, but it is a good movie. He knows something that it appears no one else knows. He wants to live that way. If I can't, then I at least want to see what no one else sees. And if I can't see what no one else sees, I want to at least believe and hear the stories of the unseen one. That should be our key. That we can hear the stories in the Scripture of the unseen one and live our lives differently because of faith in the unseen. Not walking by sight, but walking by faith. And that's who we need to be and want to be. Situation comes up in 2 Kings 4 through 6. I had 2 through 8, and I had to cut it down to 4 through 8. And finally I had to cut it down to 4 through 6 because it was going to be too long a sermon. But we have a situation there where, in my opinion, God is trying to get his wife's attention. He married Israel at Mount Sinai, and he married Israel with covenant completely, and that was his intent, to be in this relationship with Israel. And Israel's now come into the land, and David's been king, and Solomon's been king, and we get this divided kingdom going. And the nation just continues to degrade. And there's a sad verse right at the beginning of 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 1, verse 2. 2 Kings 1, verse 2. Ahaziah fell through the lattice in his upper chamber, which was in Samaria, became ill. So he sent messengers and said to them, "Go inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, whether I will recover from this sickness." Now, it's the first time in Scripture that we have the king of Israel going to ask from Baal whether or not they're going to be okay. The marriage between Yahweh and Israel has become distant enough that Israel is reaching out to other lovers and seeking others to be in relationship with them. And Yahweh is going to make himself known. Maybe the way a jealous husband would. And he's going to show himself in some powerful ways to say, "Wait just a moment. Before you leave me, can't you look for a moment and see what you've got? I want to flex my muscles. I want to show you that I am all that you need, that I am everything that will ever be required by you, that I satisfy you totally and completely. And I pray that you'll accept the images that are there. And Elisha is the tool that God uses to make this presentation back to Israel. And Elisha's walking through life as the prophet of God, seeing stuff that no one else is seeing. Seeing things that are possible that no one else thinks is possible. Now, they had a school of the prophets, and there were about 100 prophets in this school that sort of followed around near where Elisha was. And one of them died and left a widow with 2 sons. And she cries out to Elisha and says, "What am I going to do? My husband is gone. And I have these children to support. I have no livelihood." He says, "What have you got?" And she says, "I have nothing in the house except a little bit of oil." And we're in 2 Kings chapter 4 now, and we'll stay 4 through 6. And they'll come up on the screen like this eventually. He begins to look at her and say, "What I want you to do is get with all your neighbors, collect all the jars you can. I want you to find every vessel that will hold oil that you can possibly find that will hold oil. Don't get a few. Get as many as you can. Go into your house, close your door, and start pouring the oil." If I'm this widow lady, I'm sitting here saying, well, there's enough oil already for the canister it's in. It's not full. She's going to go and close all the doors. I always wonder in this story if she had known what was about to happen, if she'd have found a few more jars. She finds all that she can. She goes into her house and she begins to pour oil. And the first one gets full, and she tells her son, "Hand me another one." He hands her another one, and it gets full. "Hand me another one." She keeps pouring. "Hand me another one." And she just keeps pouring. The creditors are on them, and they're about to take her 2 sons as slaves to pay the debt that the father left. Keep pouring. And finally, the son says, "There's no more vessels." And the oil stops. Ceases. And the unseen God shows to this woman a provision. She comes to Elisha and says, "What am I supposed to do now?" And he says, "Sell enough to pay your debts and keep the rest to live on. Just sell it as long as you need it. You and your sons can live on the rest." And the God who is seen by Elisha as the one that provides flexes his muscle to Israel and says, "See, I'm the one that provides. I told you when we crossed the Red Sea, I'd take care of you and I'd feed you. And here I am again. There's a widow in need, and I just fed her. Took care of her need." Then there's the next story. Chapter 4, verse 8. We've got this woman from Shunem. Now, Shunem is in the land of Issachar, but it's almost like a foreign land. And actually, Elisha uses Gehazi to translate. He is the go-between. And Elisha speaks to Gehazi, and he can speak to this Shunammite woman. And Elisha goes by there one day, and she is a prominent woman, a great woman. She has resources. And so she feeds him, provides a meal of hospitality to him. He comes by again, and she gives him another hospitable meal. And she says, "I perceive that this is a holy man of God." She asked her husband, "Is it okay for us to build him an upper chamber?" What I'd really like to do is have this little addition that the Elisha can have as his missionary apartment. And I'd like a bed in it, and I'd like a table and a chair and a lamp. So anytime he's traveling through this area, he's just got a standing place to just stop and stay. He doesn't need to ask. He just goes to his room. He has a location. Well, she is a wonderfully generous, observant woman. So Elisha takes advantage of this and starts living there when he's passing through that area. And his servant is named Gehazi. And he asks Gehazi, "What can we do for her?" So they call the Shunammite woman upstairs and say, "What would you like? Would you like me to talk to the king? Would you like me to talk to the army people?" Because I'm sure the army people take their reserves from the people of the land. And she's a prominent woman. She's probably taxed pretty severely. She says, no, I'm fine. I live among my own people. Everything's cool. Don't have any real needs that way. So she goes back down, and Elisha asks Gehazi, what can we do for her? And Gehazi says, what? Her husband's getting rather old, and she doesn't have any children. So Elisha calls her back up and says, at this time next year, you'll be holding your son on your lap. And she says, no, don't say it if you don't mean it. I can't hear that if it's not going to be genuine and true. I can't hear that. He says, no, at this time next year, you'll have your own child on your lap. So a year later, sure enough, she has a child. The child grows up, gets old enough to go to the field. That may have been pretty young in their age. May have been taking a drink to his dad. I don't know how old he was. I don't think he's an older worker yet. Just old enough to go and be a part of his dad's work. He gets out there and he says, my head. And his dad's busy in the field, so he tells his servant, take him back to his mother. So he takes him back, lays him on his mother's lap. And by noontime, he's dead. Now, the Shunammite woman simply takes him and goes upstairs, lays him out on Elisha's bed, and gets one of her husband's servants. Says, get me a donkey, and don't slow down unless I tell you to, and let's get to Mount Carmel as fast as we can. And so this servant and this woman are now on their way to Mount Carmel, and Elisha is on Mount Carmel, and he looks and he sees her coming, and he says to Gehazi, the Shunammite woman, he says, run down there and see if everything's okay. So Gehazi runs down there, and he asks if everything's all right, and she says, it is well. Liar. Well, she's a mother with a desire, right? She tells Gehazi everything's okay because she's not going to let anything circumvent her from getting to the man of God, this Elisha. She comes to Elisha, falls at his feet, is clinging to his feet, saying, the child that you gave me and that was promised has died. And so Elisha looks at Gehazi, hands him his staff, and says, run as fast as you can. Don't greet anyone. If anyone greets you, don't even say howdy. You just run as fast as you can. Lay this staff on his face. And Gehazi takes off. And the mother, if you think I'm leaving you, Elisha, you're crazy. I'm not going anywhere without you. So Elisha has to get up and take the journey. The mother will not leave him. They travel all the way back to Shunem. They get into the house. Gehazi's met them back on the road. When Gehazi meets him on the road, he says, I did what you told me to, and the child is still dead. So Elisha goes in, puts Gehazi and his mom outside, and lays on this boy. Nose to nose, mouth to mouth, hand to hand, feet to feet, and lays on it until the body starts to warm up a little bit. Elisha gets up, walks back and forth in the room. God is telling Israel, I can bring you back to life. God is trying to flex his muscles for his bride. There's nothing I can't do. Why are you looking around? Elisha lays back out on top of this boy. He gets up, the boy sneezes 7 times. 7's going to be important in this morning's lesson. The boy sneezes 7 times, and it's fine. Gets up, he hands her to his mom, says, take him downstairs, everything's okay. Because Elisha could see what no one else could see. Elisha knew the power of God. The unseen armies that were fighting in the heavenly places, Elisha can see God's. He knows how powerful he is. And he says, God can take care of this. Our God is not a weak God that wants us to live in that fear. 2 quick stories at the end of chapter 4. Very brief stories. Elisha's with the prophets, and they're going to eat, and one of the prophets, I don't know who it would be. Let's call him Bob Buckle. Call him Bob. Bob's been out gathering gourds, all right? Says, get something to go in the stew, and Bob sees a gourd that looks sort of like a squash to him, and he grabs it and brings it back, and we're cutting it up, putting it in the stew. And somebody tasted it and says, this is poisonous. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. We can't, there's death in the pot. Death in the pot. We're going to die if we eat this stuff. So Elisha says, bring me a little meal. And he takes a little meal, throws it into the soup, says, it'll be okay now. If I'm one of the prophets, I say, yeah, right. You bite it first. You eat it first. But it's good food. There's nothing wrong with it. It gets to be harvest time. 20 loaves of bread show up. They're small loaves. And some fresh ears of grain, they show up. Elisha says, feed the guys. And the guy that he tells to feed him says, wait a minute, you want me to take this out there to feed 100 people? It's like going and getting a Happy Meal, saying, let's all eat together at church this morning. One Happy Meal, right? We're not going to have anything to eat. Elisha says, no, feed the people. When you feed the people, they're going to have some leftovers. Everybody eats. Everybody eats bread and grain. And they have leftovers. Anybody hear Jesus feeding the 5,000? You see, Jesus begins to echo a lot of these events when he comes as God into the world, reaching out to the world. He reaches out to the widow. He raises the widow of Nain's son. He feeds the 5,000. A lot of his examples are to show us, remember who our God is. Remember, our God is the one who has always been powerful and mighty and is able to save in profound ways. I want you to act like the folks in Springtown that know something everybody else wishes they knew. You know the unseen God. That's who we want to be. Situation in Israel is really not much better. And there's a little girl that's captured by the Arams, the Syrian army, as they come in. She's taken off, and she's made a servant of Naaman's wife. And Naaman is a captain in the army of the Syrians, and Naaman has leprosy. And this little girl from Israel says, boy, I wish he knew the prophet that's in Israel. I want you to be sure to hear that. It's a little girl, probably littler than these. It's probably these little girls. It's a little girl. Been taken captive. She's now a servant to this lady. I wish he knew the prophet of Yahweh, our God. I want you to be sure and read something with me. Look at chapter 5, 2 Kings 5, verse 1. Now Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man with his master and highly respected, because by him Yahweh had given victory to Aram. God's already been at work in this guy's life. Yahweh has already been at work in Naaman's life. By him, Yahweh has given victory to the enemy of Israel. God's already using Naaman. But he doesn't know it. The little girl says, I just wish that he knew the prophet of God. So he goes to the king of Aram and says, hey, there's a little girl here, says there's a guy down there in Israel that can heal me. And the king says, I'll write you a letter. You just trot down there, gets to the king of Israel. Get yourself healed. So he shows up to the king of Israel, hands this letter to him and says, I understand that there is a prophet of God that can heal this man of his leprosy. I want my servant healed. And the king immediately tears his clothes. The king of Israel says, the king of Aram is just picking a fight with me. Am I God that I could heal someone of their leprosy? What's his problem? Can't see the unseen. Not only can he not see the unseen, he hasn't listened to the stories of the unseen God. The little girl knows about Elisha, but the king sitting in his palace doesn't even trust Elisha. He's tearing his clothes, pulling his hair out, literally. And Elisha sends a messenger to him and says, hey, is there no prophet in Israel? There's a prophet over here. Send him to me. So Naaman comes to Elisha. It's a cool story. When Naaman comes to Elisha, he figures what's going to happen. You ever get those preconceptions when you go to the doctor? This is how this is going to go. I know exactly what's going to happen. You get to the doctor, you get to the reception's room, and the nurse comes out and says, go home, gargle 3 times, you'll be okay. Well, I want to see the doctor. Behold, I thought, that's what Naaman says, behold, I thought that the man of God would come out here and wave his hand over the spot and my leprosy would be gone. That's how I perceived it. This is how Yahweh was going to work on me. Elisha says, go down to the Jordan River, dip 7 times. I told you 7 was significant. Dip 7 times and you'll be healed. You'll have skin like a little child. Naaman is irate. I saw the water on the Jordan as we crossed it. Abana and Pharpar. Our rivers are a lot cleaner than whatever they've got down here in Jordan. I could have stayed home for this. I didn't need this sort of lesson. What in the world? Well, and his servants, someone brazenly comes to him and says, calm down. Let me talk to you a minute. If he'd asked you to do some great thing, wouldn't you have done it? Wouldn't you have done it? A whole lot of people come to God saying, how much would it cost for me to go to heaven? Give me a number, I'll see if I can write the check. It'd be okay, wouldn't it? Yeah, get that number down. It might be my worst nightmare, I can't tell. No, where are we going to go? Who's going to write that? Just tell me what I have to do. How many times do I have to go to church? How many times do I have to be nice? Tell me what the debt is. I'll do the big thing. No, I want you to humbly submit to do something that doesn't look reasonable to you. Naaman listens to his servants, goes down to the Jordan, dips himself. The 7th time comes up, got skin like a baby. He runs up to Elisha. You're the man. And your God is the God. Yahweh is the only God in all the world. And I'm not going to worship any God but your God, because He is God of all the world. Let me give you a present for my healing. No, I won't take any of your stuff. I'm not taking any of your clothes or any of your gold. I'm not taking any of your stuff. Now, there's an amazing verse that comes in there. It's in chapter 5. An amazing verse in verse 17. Naaman said, if not, let your servant at least be given 2 mules' loads of earth. For your servant will no longer offer burnt offering, nor will he make sacrifice to other gods, but to Yahweh. In this matter, may Yahweh pardon your servant. Now listen to this. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, Yahweh, pardon your servant in this matter. And Elisha says, go in peace. That's an amazing section. I'm only going to worship Yahweh, but when I get home, my master is going to demand that I go into his idolatrous temple. And I'm going to walk into his idolatrous temple, and I'm going to kneel there, and he's going to put his hand on my shoulder, and he's going to kneel there in front of this false god. And while I'm there, I'm on the dirt of Israel. I am not kneeling to Rimmon. I am only kneeling to Yahweh. I will not worship any other god. What's the king of Israel doing? He's bowing down to every other god in the world. He's building temples and sacrifice places to Baal and Molech and any god you can name, Chemosh. He's going further and further away from God, and the foreigners are getting it. The outsiders, God is saying, those on the fringes, those in Shunem, those on the edges, those widows that are marginalized, those foreign army captains that I've already appointed, They're the ones that are understanding my relationship with Israel, and Israel treats it as nothing. They don't understand me at all. My wife doesn't get me. Everyone in the world knows how I treat my wife, but my wife thinks I'm disrespectful, that I don't treat her with love and respect. Well, Naaman, he is healed and he goes in peace. I had to skip over the cool story about making the iron axe head float so we could get to the point of this morning's lesson. I wrote all of that so we could study this. But we're going to do it quick. In 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 8 through 23, the king of Aram makes his battle plans. He says, we're going to go down to this spring, and we're going to wait for the king of Israel to show up with his army, and when he does, we're going to ambush him. And Elisha calls the king. Well, he didn't have a phone. But Elisha makes the call to the king and says, hey, don't go down to that spring because the Syrians are waiting for you there. And so the king sends a couple of spies. Sure enough, the Syrian army is there. Next time, the king of Aram says, hey, we're going to get the king of Israel here. Elisha sends to him and says, don't go over there. The king of Aram's waiting for you. Finally, the king of Aram throws up his hand. Which one of you guys is spying for Israel? Who's telling him, before I think it in my bedchamber, he's already telling the king of Israel what it is. And they say, look, it's not one of us. It's that man of God who can see the unseen. It's that man of God that knows stuff that no one else can know. It's Elisha's fault, not ours. And he says, go get him. That's going to be fun. Go get him. We don't know where he is. I know where he is. He's in Dothan. Go get him. So he sends his entire Syrian army, at least a bunch of it, to the little town of Dothan. And Gehazi, or the servant of Elisha, finds out about this army. He gets up early in the morning, goes out to get firewood and water like you would in any situation like that. Looks up, military people everywhere. They're lined completely, the entire city, encircled with a Syrian army. Goes back in and tells Elisha, I think we got a little problem. I think we have a little situation here. Because I am a lot like the prophet's servant. I can usually see about as far as my eyes will witness. Is that how yours work? I'm as faithful as I can see. I can walk as far as I am confident that everything is there. Elisha sees the unseen. Elisha is like Moses, that I read about. Moses lives like he sees the unseen. I want you to walk about the streets of Springtown and Poolville and Beaster and Boyd and Northwest, wherever you're walking this. I want you not to be arrogant, but I want you to act like you can see the unseen. Elisha says, Lord, open his eyes so he can see. Let him see what's out there. For just a moment, split it open and let him see what Byron talked about before. I want you to split the skies open for a moment. And I want you to see in the spiritual dimension the armies of God that are fighting at our disposal. The ones that Jesus could have called to the cross. The ones that you have access to. The spirits of God that are ministering on our behalf. Angels and spirits and world forces of good and evil. And they're conflicted in that realm. Elisha says, what I'd like you to do is just open his eyes. And Gehazi is standing here with Elisha, and the entire Syrian army is here, and suddenly the chariots of fire and the horses of fire are surrounding the Syrian army. And the servant's finally able to say, aha, I didn't know that's what Elisha was looking at all the time. I didn't know Elisha was seeing what no one else could see. I didn't know he was walking in that sort of power and that sort of faith. Elisha says, Lord, now that my servant can see, I'd like all of these soldiers to not see. Soldiers all go blind. And then he pulls an Obi-Wan move on them. It's literally an Obi-Wan move. See how it sounds to you. It is almost exactly like Obi-Wan when he actually says this, as soon as I find it. He says in verse 19 of chapter 6, this is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man that you see. I mean, that's in the text. That's exactly what it says. I'm just reading the Bible to you. You thought someone that wrote Star Wars read the Bible. No, this is not the man. This is not the way. Let me take you where you want to go. Takes the entire Syrian army, marches them into the capital city. They all get inside the gate, and he says, now, Lord, open their eyes. And now they can see where they are. And the king of Israel, the same king who had torn his clothes when Naaman was there trying to be healed, the same guy now says, shall I kill him? Shall I kill him? And that's in the text too, just that way. That's he says, what would you do? If you took them captive in battle, would you kill them? I simply captured all of them, feed them, and send them home. He creates a great feast, a massive feast for the Syrian army. He says, now let that be a lesson to you guys. Go home. I don't know about you, but if I show up and I'm in battle mode and my enemy is suddenly so powerful that they encircle me and so mighty that one man says, you don't know what you're seeing, I'm going to be astounded. And they go home, and for a long time they don't do anything to Israel again. Eventually they do. But for a long time they don't. Oh Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Some of you are living with great fear in your life. Where faith exists, fear has to flee. I don't know what you're afraid of. God's not afraid of you. He is not afraid of you. I don't know what you're trying to deal with. God's able to deal with it. Don't you understand the difficulties that I have? Here's your take home this morning. Don't you realize where I'm at? But are you living by faith in God's ability? Or are you just walking, struggling to get by on what you can see? All I can see are issues and problems, and I don't know how it's going to function. I don't know what's going to happen. And we can be fear-mongers, right? He comes along and says, no. I want you to walk as though you're seeing what Elisha saw. Seeing the unseen God. There is no fear in faith. We put our trust in the God that is beyond any comprehension. And so I pray for you this week that you will see the unseen and that you'll read those stories again and have that question. Did you see that? Did you see what Elisha did to that widow? Did you see what Elisha did with that food? Did you see what Elisha did to that woman that needed to have a child? Did you see what Elisha did to Naaman? Did you see what Elisha did to the Syrian army? When you hear all of that, I want you to look in the backdrop where what God is saying to Israel is, I never went anywhere. I've been here all the time. I was always willing to supply everything you ever needed. Why are you being an adulteress? Why are you playing with any other God but me? I am the only God. I've got foreigners willing to take dirt off of your soil, take it home and say, we won't bow down to anyone but Yahweh. But I got everyone in Israel say, we'll bow down to anything that comes along. Don't be idolatrous and don't be fearful. See the unseen.